Hello friends. That countdown before you go live is a little intimidating. But anyway, we are in the car. Sorry about being in the car here. But I am here with campaign manager Dustin. Say hello, Dustin.
Hello.
Dustin's got to focus on driving, so instead I am going to answer the question. I was trying to get him to answer all the questions this week, but I'm going to answer I guess you would say, what I would normally say listener questions, but it's not really, we don't have a radio program or anything like that, but constituent questions, let's put it that way. And we threw the sort of open call for questions up on the Facebook, and I want to try to address some of those. I can't get to all of them this week, but we are keeping a running document of all the questions that you guys have asked us on Twitter and on Facebook, and we're keeping that along with our other campaign stuff. And so if you don't get an answer to your question this week, then there's at least a decent possibility that you get an answer next week or the week after. So we're going to try to hit all the big stuff between now and November of 2018 and probably thereafter. So the first question we got from Twitter from user K Noisewater MD. Hello, K Noisewater MD. And he asks, what is a protection or benefit that is denied to American workers that you would advocate for being provided? And I just saw that comment come in about my phone. Don't put down my phone. You don't know what phone we've got this on. You stop. Anyway, I'm trying to do important stuff here. So what is a protection or benefit that is denied to American workers that you would advocate for being provided? And I care about this stuff because, a lot of you know that civil rights lawyer, I started out doing like 75% employment work. So we've worked pretty intimately on cases involving the Fair Labor Standards Act and employment discrimination at the state and federal level. And I think, talking about, there's a lot on this. First off, the Fair Labor Standards Act, I think there's way too many exemptions there, which means that people are not getting overtime pay that should be getting overtime pay. And with all the loopholes and the exemptions that are in the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, you've got the problem of, you've got a big corporation that will assign somebody this sort of arbitrary title as, you're a manager, you manage this, or you're the quality assurance such and such, or you're the executive this and that. And that gives them this sort of loophole to then not pay that person overtime. You can work them, for this tiny little salary for 80 or 90 hours a week and still not have to pay them overtime. And so that's bad. We'd close up, in my heart of hearts, I would close up a bunch of those loopholes. Another big thing is that we've championed for years, and that a bill is proposed all the time. Bills are proposed on this all the time. And I think they've been trying to get this passed for about 20 years now, is the explicit addition of sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes under Title VII and other employment discrimination provisions, right? So right now that's sort of winding its way through the courts, but I think it would be great from a legislative standpoint if we have explicit protections built into the law, because there aren't any. Right now, if you're gay or you're trans, you can be fired for that, technically under the federal law. Now there's the EEOC has taken a contrary position to that, and that's, again, it's working its way through the courts. I think it will eventually end up at the Supreme Court, most likely, and I don't know that we can put a lot of confidence in that. We need to have that explicitly written into the law. The other thing, biggest thing probably for us right now is not only livable wages, but, having the dignity of a livable wage, right? That's very important. That if somebody works a full-time job, at the end of the week, we ought to make sure that they've got enough money to put some away, that everybody's not just living paycheck to paycheck. If you're breaking your body working that full-time job, you ought to be able to have money left over at the end of the week to reinvest in your community, to put some away from your retirement, to where you're not having to spend your last years worrying about where your next meal's coming from. That's super important. That's just a basic dignity thing, right? And the other bit is paid family and medical leave. Super important, top priority. where we're talking about, right now 36% of private sector workers don't have access to a single day of paid sick leave. This is really bad for workers. It's particularly bad for families. And Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Gillibrand, has introduced the what's it called, the Family Act, that would guarantee paid family and medical leave to everybody. Basically, it's a federal program. They're doing this in California and they're doing this in New York, and it's a good idea. And that you've got workers that are eligible to receive paid family and medical leave benefits equal to 66% of their typical monthly wages. And there's a cap under in Senator Gillibrand's act that I don't know that I'm all that excited about, but it's essentially, it's a program like Social Security where you pay into it. It's like an insurance program. It would cost workers about $1.61 a week for the typical full-time employee. And they're doing this in states, and it's another reason why that's so important for people of Indiana and in the heartland, where we're not sending our kids to the coast, right? We're not chasing them to the coast. We're not chasing them to New York. We're not chasing them to California, where they've got tuition-free public universities. They've got family medical leave that's paid, all that stuff. Where these things that make it so much easier for people to raise young families. We need to have that here in Indiana. And I think we also need to start. The last thing is that we need to start looking at strategies to provide universal child care. That's some distance away, but it's something that we need to start having a national dialogue about. Let's see. Next question. Twitter user, all 4 word, it looks like. It's, do you see a need for a federal initiative to fight voter registration and electoral fraud? Is this a real issue? No. But closely related to that is the question from a Facebook user that says, I like that you oppose tax breaks for the wealthy. Thank you. Since you're a civil rights attorney, what would you do about protecting voting rights? Would you work to restore the Voting Rights Act? How would you oppose voter suppression? So as far as the Voting Rights Act stuff, there's a couple of different questions I think going on there, but it all has to do with voter turnout, voter suppression. And my immediate response is over voter suppression, especially the sort of racist voter suppression that we see in the wake of the Supreme Court decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act, is that my lawyer brain kicks in and I say, let's sue over it. And that's been a successful strategy in places where they have attempted voter suppression. You see states like North Carolina immediately in response to that disastrous Supreme Court decision starting to suppress votes in a sort of blatantly racist way. The lawsuits on that are working, and we need to ensure that we can maintain the integrity of the federal court system and support them and let them do their job, because the federal courts are smacking those laws down, and that's a good thing. But so there's not much we can do about the Voting Rights Act specifically, but I think from a legislative standpoint, there's still plenty that we can do to increase voter turnout, and that's dire here in Indiana. In 2014, we were dead last in voter turnout, and so that's bad. 2016, we were close to number 40. I think we're number 36 or something like that in voter turnout. So we can do better as far as that goes, and we ought to be looking at legislative strategies to increase that voter turnout. There's a few things that we can do. We can start letting people register online. We can, if we can get our security locked down and get that system technologically up to speed, we can let people vote online, and I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking into doing that. In fact, the only reason not to look at doing something like that is voter suppression. There's a national, I would advance a national automatic voter registration. So if you look at what Illinois just did, is they've gone to automatic voter registration statewide. I think we should start looking at that, a national system to do automatic voter registration of some kind. Getting people registered, of course, is just half the battle. They have to be able to get to the polls, they have to be able to actually vote, and they have to want to actually vote, and those are all sort of independent and unique problems. I think one thing we can do is make Election Day a federal holiday. I would go so far as to move it to a Saturday or Sunday to make it easier for working people to show up and vote. But of course, the bigger challenge is getting people engaged and getting them to care. When you have, a miserable like 40% voter turnout, it's not all because of voter suppression. A lot of that is because of voter apathy, and so that's our biggest challenge. We've got to have more difficult conversations with a broader base of people. That's what this campaign is going to be about a lot. We're going to be out. We're going to be knocking on doors. We're going to be talking to people, and we're going to be engaging with them and trying to convince them that their vote actually does matter and that it's actually going to make a difference in their day-to-day lives. When you've got a lot of people that are so disengaged and I think so cynical about the political process overall that they don't know even who their representatives are. I've talked to lots and lots of people in the district and in the state overall that don't know who they voted for the last time, and they don't know who the representative is now. And we've got to figure out how to change that. Sorry, Dustin's phone is ringing. So that's a challenge. We've got to be able to sort of get in, talk to people about what matters, and almost condense civic lessons down into 10-minute conversations. I think also, though, that what we're really trying to do is to get people motivated by giving them a positive agenda of things that they can vote for. We've had a very long story. Part of the reason for all the cynicism is that people are showing up to vote against the candidate they like the least and not for a positive agenda of things, a list of things that's actually going to help them and improve their lives. If we can show voters or potential voters that, look, we really have policies here that are going to make a meaningful difference in your life every day, I think we can get people more excited about coming to vote. Of course, that's about having the right candidates, having the right policies, having the right messaging strategies, and that is all very difficult and very complicated. Last question that I've got time for, because we're going to get into a dead zone here, I think on the interstate, is, hi Dan, I'm a grandma that is very concerned about environmental issues now that we're seeing the EPA targeted with less funding for their budget. Right. What are your positions about the environmental protection laws? I worry what kind of a future my grandchildren and their children will inherit. Well, yeah, me too. I've got, a 4.5-year-old and a 1-year-old little girls at home, and I worry about this, and I'm sure a lot of you saw that New York Magazine article that was making the rounds earlier this week that is sort of apocalyptic and is all doom and gloom, and it's terrifying, right? There was a lot of news about the Paris Accords and, us withdrawing from the Paris Accords, and obviously that's very bad. But I think, even those kind of stories bury the lead. And I see your message coming through, Adam Dickey. No, I'm not driving while I'm doing this. Dustin, if you had tuned into this video earlier, you would know that Dustin is driving the car. Anyway, the lead story here is the dismantling of the EPA, right? That's what the Trump administration has, I don't think they've come right out and said, well, we'd like to dismantle the EPA, but that's clearly what they're doing. And obviously that's where we got to start, is to ensure that the EPA itself is protected, that it's adequately staffed, that it's got people there that care about the environment itself and not just big business. And that it's got teeth to enforce the regulations that are in place. In my sort of visionary fantasyland mode, if you made me emperor for a day, I would establish a separate agency that could impose and enforce meaningful restrictions on practices that contribute to global climate change, because global climate change is a big problem. It's an emergent problem, and we got to figure out ways to deal with that. And when I say enforcement and all that stuff, I mean, that could be one aspect of it, but I also think that we need to put serious research money into looking at strategies to reverse the damage that's already been done, and to make sure that that stuff doesn't get worse. And so there's some interesting research going on in the field of what they call geoengineering now, where you know, they're trying to figure out how to sort of abrogate the effects of global warming that we're already feeling, because we're already, you know, getting some of the first refugees of global climate change. People are actually being chased out of their homes by rising shorelines, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is becoming a more and more emergent thing, and people are researching ways to sort of reverse those effects without creating even more environmental disasters. You know, I don't know that there's a good sort of panacea answer to that question, except to say, you know, we've got to do more to protect the environment. And we are going to be in beautiful downtown Bloomington tonight for our kickoff event. If any of you are watching from there, we're going to be at Uptown on the Square, and that's at 5:30. We are also going to be on, I think it's WFIU. What's this radio station, Dustin, that we're going to be on? We're going to be on public radio in Bloomington tonight. We should know what that is, but I'll post it here after I get off this video. We're going to be on that. I think that is going to be about 5:15, but we're going up to tape that now. And then we're in Johnson County for our kickoff this weekend in Greenwood. That's on Sunday at 2 p.m. So lots and lots of chances to come out and tell me why my answers in this video are all wrong, and what we can do to work together to find the right answers. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll do this again next week. And please send your questions to the Facebook group or to the Twitter account. Thanks a lot, everybody.